Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Three Geeks conversation. Today, it's just me, Jason, joined by Robert. Robert, how you doing?
It's nice to meet you, Jason. I'm doing fine. I'm feeling good, and I'm very happy to be here. And welcome to my cave.
It looks nice in the background. I was trying to check out your poster to see all it said, but it's hard to read from.
Well, I started doing, this is a bit new for me. I started, I'm a screenwriter. I've been writing movies for a long time, and maybe some that you've seen in the past, and I directed a couple. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And I started with a novel a long time ago that was turned into a miniseries called Feud. I co-wrote the novel. It wasn't a solo effort. It was co-writing. And I co-wrote the novel about the Kennedy administration and their war on organized crime.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really fascinated by it and fascinated by Bobby Kennedy. And so I wrote that, and then 20th Century Fox bought it, and they wanted to turn it into a miniseries. And then I alone wrote the miniseries, adapted from my book. And from then on, I've always been writing movies.
Mm-hmm.
Feud actually won the Writers Guild Award for the best miniseries. And it was nominated for Emmys and things like that. So I was very fortunate with my first big foray into television. And I've been writing screenplays ever since. And then during the recent Writers Guild strike, not only am I a loyal member of the Writers Guild, I'm also an award winner. So I have a great respect for what they do and what they accomplish. So I knew I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody about a screenplay while the strike was on. And I knew the strike was going to be going on for a while. So I thought, but I can't talk to people about a novel. So I thought I might turn back to my first love, writing a novel. So then I started writing Black Sun. And what you see behind you is a poster, because I went to spend time with my daughter in Texas. And so I decided to do some, once the book was published, I decided to do a few book signing events at bookstores. And so I basically developed a poster that said "Meet Bob Boris" and talk about some of the movies I've made. So that's what you see back there. It's my introduction to Texas, and it's my introduction to the Three Geeks.
Awesome. So where are you from originally?
I am a Brooklyn boy, brought up and raised and born in Brooklyn, raised in the early days in Brooklyn. It was a very famous area in my youth that were known for a gang of kids called the Amboy Dukes. And it was really, this was street gangs in the early 50s. And I lived in Brooklyn. I talked to some people saying I was very fortunate, probably one of the few people around who can actually say I went to the Polo Grounds where the Giants played baseball, Ebbets Field where the Brooklyn Dodgers played baseball, and Yankee Stadium where the Yankees play baseball and still do. So I was lucky enough to be raised in Brooklyn and be able to spend time in all three ballparks. And then I moved on to Washington Heights, and I lived for a number of years in Washington Heights in the teen years. And then I got into some trouble. I was a fairly intelligent guy who was always in love with writing and always in love with movies. And I got into trouble, got into some things that kids get into, and they sent me to a kind of reform school that was in upstate New York. So I left my home early. I was only about 14, and I was basically removed from my home. And I moved upstate to a place where I had some training and some therapy and some all the kinds of education that they set a young kid straight. And they were wonderful people. So I spent time there, and then from there they allowed me to come and move into the village where there was a halfway house. So I lived in Greenwich Village. So I got to travel around as a kid, mostly on the East Coast, almost exclusively on the East Coast. But I would say that my early days were Brooklyn, my teen years were Washington Heights, which is still very well known and a celebrated area. And then after being upstate in reform school, I was in a halfway house in Greenwich Village, and that was a spectacular way to grow up. And I lived in a halfway house that was only about a block away from a very famous venue called the Fillmore East, which is where all the great bands of the day and the musicians of the day were playing. And you had people like the Doors and Janis Joplin and absolutely just wonderful artists, Jefferson Starship. I mean, wonderful, wonderful artists. And I got a job as a kid working backstage, working in the lights. And the whole idea of growing up and being able to see those performers, like as close as I am to you right now, maybe I'm not close to you. And in their world, I wasn't close to them either. But I was in close proximity. Their face was as clear to me and as close to me as yours is right now. And I spent time listening to Janis Joplin. I mean, only 20 feet away, and or listening to Jim Morrison of the Doors on the main stage. So it was an extraordinary experience. I was a very lucky kid, even though I'd gone through a lot of crap. I was a lucky kid, and after that, I took one shot at college, and I got, even though all the troubles that I had and even had been left back for a while, I got into what many people consider as the best undergraduate drama school in the country, which was Carnegie Mellon, and their drama department, which was very tough to get into. And they accepted me to study playwriting because they read a couple of plays that I wrote, and I received a full scholarship. So I was able to get an education, even though I'd gone through a lot of tough times. And that set me up for coming back to New York and starting to say I had a rule in my head, which was, if I'm going to make any money and make a living, it's got to be with words. And that's what I did.
When did you discover your love for writing? Because I know you mentioned it.
Well, I think, to be perfectly honest, I mean, I laughingly say, I think I fell out of the womb holding a pencil, but I wanted to write, I think, from the very beginning. When I was a kid, what I wrote as a really young kid, pre-teens actually, I was writing poems. There was a thing in New York. It's called the Anthology of Poetry, junior high school poetry, and I wrote a poem that got into that book. And so I was in love with writing from the very beginning. My first sale, actually seeing a check, I think it was for $23, is that somebody told me about some greeting card companies that were looking for greeting cards. So I wrote out about 20 greeting cards and I sent them, and they bought one. And I got a check from a greeting card company for like $23. And that was like the most thrilling day of my life. But I knew I was always into writing then. So then I started, in later years, I started to write plays. I thought I was going to be a playwright. So I knew I loved drama. I read all the great authors and novels and works of fiction. But the movies just captivated me. The idea of seizing the brain with images and excitement and taking you to a world and visualizing it for you that you could never see in a lifetime. That was just thrilling beyond belief. So I knew that I wanted to write movies, but the first thing that I started to do was to write plays. And even as a kid, when I was living at this halfway house, I met some people that worked at a place that has a certain legendary status, and I got a job. And I met people who ran it. It was called the Living Theater, and it was a very famous New York off-Broadway theater group. And they did wonderfully dazzling, brilliant, uncommon plays. There was one that was called what was it, The Connection? that I think Shirley Clark actually filmed it, and it was a play about drug addicts. And it was the first one that really, tried to make people understand what drug addicts were all about. And the clever, idea behind it, and it was actually quite brilliant, was that they treated the audience when they came into the theater, and you got to see in this little theater that was actually in above the first floor. It was on like a loft kind of theater, but it seated, I guess, about under 300 people. And what they did, the idea behind them was, here are a bunch of drug addicts that are sitting around. We've gathered them so you can see them on stage, and they're waiting for their connection to arrive. So this was kind of like the setup of the Waiting for Godot. So you're invited to sit there and watch as these guys talk amongst themselves, and you get the sense that they really are drug addicts. The producer talked to the stage. The actors who were playing these drug addicts walked out to the front of the stage. They sat down on the stage. They walked into the audience. They treated it like they were rambling drug addicts who were waiting desperately for the connection to arrive. And then with the thing that I love most about it was during the intermission, during the break, when people were stepping into the lobby to have a drink or have something and to catch some air, the actors came out and they bummed money. So they tried to get a few bucks from the people who were theater goers. So the audience was absolutely convinced that they were watching actual drug addicts. And the play actually ended up winning, I think, a Pulitzer Prize. It was in a remarkable play. But I was there working backstage, doing stuff for them. And so I got to see that at the very beginning, and it totally captivated me. So my first movement was towards writing plays. And then after college, when I came back from college, I got into the very first job I got coming out of it was in movie advertising. So I was right away into movie advertising. And to this day, I keep hoping to one day meet with Clint Eastwood, because I feel he owes his entire career to me, and he doesn't know it. And I say that facetiously, it's a joke, but the first job that I had when I came back out of college was working in movie advertising. So they used to send you to go to watch a movie. That was part of your job. Imagine being paid to sit down in a dark theater and watch a movie, and then go back to the office and write ads for the movie. The biggest spy thriller ever made, all that kind of stuff. And one weekend or one Friday night, they called me at the end and said, United Artists has a very successful movie in Europe. It's a Western. It's doing very well. And there's some TV guy in it. And they want to get it out here right away and get it out into the theaters right away. So go to United Artists on Monday morning at 9:00 and see the movie, and then go write some ads. So I thought, what a great job. I'm getting paid on Monday morning to go to the basement of the United Artists building in New York City and sit down and watch a movie, have a cup of coffee and sit down, put my feet up. I was the only guy in the theater. And I watched the movie. And the movie was Fistful of Dollars. And it was Clint's first of the Italian Westerns. And I knew, having been, basically a movie nut, I knew that it was based on, because I had seen Yojimbo directed by Akira Kurosawa and starring the great Toshiro Mifune. I had seen that. I know the movie backwards and forwards. I love that movie. And I knew that this was a Western version of that movie. But the movie was dazzling. It was brilliant. No Western had ever been like it at that time. Sergio Leone opened new doors as a director in terms of the Western. I knew this was special. So I came back and I told them at the company, I said, you can't do this like we do every other movie. This, when you did a Western in those days, unless it was a huge, gigantic Western with big stars, you basically said, more guns, more bullets, more babes, and more gold than you can shake a stick at, So that, and it's just do it, show some pictures, and get the hell out of there. And I said, this one is really is beautiful. It's special. You've got to treat it differently. So I argued for a long time, and they said, go ahead and do it. Take a crack at it. Do what you want. So I sat down with an art director, and I thought, I watched that movie, and they never called him anything. They said he was the big man, the tall man, the fast gun, Blondie, but they didn't have any other, they didn't give him a name. So I decided to write an ad, which we called in those days a reader ad, which it had, instead of just 5 or 6 lines, it had a huge, all text. It was a lot of words. And I wrote this, what we call purple prose. I wrote a lot of words, and I wanted to make him appear on his serape when he held his gun and held his cigar. And I wrote purple prose like danger fits him like his tight black gloves. Death swirls around him like the smoke from his cheap cheroot. He is the man with no name, and once you meet him, adventure will never be the same. And it took off. People responded to the man with no name idea, and all of a sudden I'm riding, going into the city, and I'm seeing buses with the man with no name is here, and it became the calling card for the movie. They used it in all the others, with the man with no name is back, and that man with no name was in a bigger adventure than ever with the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I laughingly say, I'm the one that came up with the man with no name, and then Clint Eastwood should, I'll take 10% of everything he's earned since making that movie. But it was one of the fun things about doing, movie advertising. And then I did some more advertising, and then I quit because I was getting too good at it. And I knew that I had a career in advertising on regular TV commercials and things like that. So I was a biker in those days, and I had seen some biking movies, and I had a big bike. I had a 750 Honda, and I chopped it up and extended the front forks, and I had this kind of cool bike. And I decided to go around the country on my bike and to prove that Easy Rider could live. So I rode around, and I had some experiences, and I ended up writing a biker movie when I came home, the first full screenplay, which was called Electra Glide in Blue, which starred Robert Blake, and he played a short motorcycle cop who gets involved in a murder mystery. And the movie it became a kind of cult classic. It's beautifully shot, and I was off and running. It was my very first screenplay, and a major studio picked it up. So I was very lucky. So that's how I got started. Your turn.
That is awesome. You mentioned earlier that you wrote Blood Feud. Were you into history growing up?
I think I always liked history. I think like a lot of writers, we respond to history. And I've always loved novels that took the basics of history and then put fictional characters into those events to help illuminate those events and do it dramatically. I knew that I wanted to do something. I talked to some people about what I'd wanted to do with my friend, and I was the one that went to Washington to interview people. I met with somebody had a connection to a very successful on-air reporter in those days, a guy named Albert Hunt. And I met with him. He took my call, and then he invited me to come talk to him. And he was a remarkable man, and I truly admire him. But he opened so many doors for me, to people in the Senate, to congressmen, to people who knew Bobby and things like that. So I started to go around and talk to a lot of people. And the reason I really got hooked on it was because I think I may be I found out that Bobby Kennedy, when his brother, the president, made him the Attorney General of the United States, who had never had a case before and argued a case in the courts. He became the Attorney General of the United States, and he was out to really cut a hole in organized crime. That for some reason, whatever his motives were, he believed that was an important job that America had to handle, and especially not allow big unions like the Teamsters to be taken over by organized crime. And he had in the basement of the Justice Department, he had an office, and it was called and he put a group together. It was called the Get Hoffa Squad. And these were FBI agents, remarkable, dedicated human beings whose sole job every single day was to get information on organized crime and especially Jimmy Hoffa. So I think I'm probably the only person around now who was able to interview every member of the Get Hoffa Squad and talk to them and get to learn about Bobby, about the war on organized crime, about the real things that happened in those days. And every time you learn the truth about history, it surprises you. There's more excitement and surprise in what history reveals about us and about what really happened than you can imagine. It's a thrilling world. So I was impressed by history, and since then, I've written more stories about Bobby Kennedy. I've written a script that I believe people are interested in producing now, called Kennedy's Mountain, about Bobby Kennedy, and he ran after feeling very guilty about his brother's murder, about the death of the president, because Bobby was so courageous in his war on organized crime, and his feeling about the Bay of Pigs, and his feeling about civil rights. He angered a lot of people. And so he was after the murder of Jack, and after Bobby ran for the presidency and after the nomination from the Democrats to be president, I know that he had said to many people that he was haunted by the fact, was it something that he did that caused his brother's death? And he felt tremendous guilt about it. But he ran for the Senate. After 3 years, he was basically like a recluse. He didn't talk to many people after Jack's death and up until 1965. And then Teddy, his brother, finally convinced him, you've got to do something with your life, and you can't be one of the victims of Oswald's bullet. And so Bobby agreed. He decided to run for the Senate, and much to his surprise, he was elected. And he won the Senate race, and he was going to go to Washington as an elected senator. And literally about 7 days before he went there, the government of Canada renamed the tallest, unclimbed, unexplored mountain peak in North America. They renamed it to Mount Kennedy as a tribute to the president who had been assassinated 3 years ago. And the parliament agreed, and so it was so named. And then Bobby got up the next morning and said, you know what? The first person to climb Mount Kennedy should be a Kennedy. So he decided that, and he hated climbing, he hated heights. And so he decided that he was going to climb Mount Kennedy, which was, I think it was 19,000 feet. And Everest is about 24,000. So it's a really huge mountain. And of course, it's also unexplored. So there's no trail up there. And if you go across a snow plateau and it's all white and covered in untread snow, you don't know if beneath it is just a thin layer of ice, and you could crash through it and drop in 20,000 feet to your death. So it's a very dangerous assault on a mountain. So I decided to write the story of Bobby's training in 3 or 4 days, and then his climb. And I thought that every time he got into trouble, which was often on the mountain, it would give him a chance to remember an important event in his life. So it's a way to explore Bobby and to explore his coming to grips with his own past as he climbs and conquers this mountain. So I wrote that, and then and I've written stories about Adam Clayton Powell. I've written stories about Marilyn Monroe. So I do like history very much.
So how involved are you with Blood Feud once you've written the script? Like, do they keep you on set in case they need any rewrites? How does that process work?
On that one, since I'm the repository of so much information about Bobby, they kept me, yes, and I was the sole writer. So they kept me on the set. I was there every day. I was part of the filming of that. I worked with all the actors, and there were some wonderful actors that were in it. They asked me questions about what I learned and how what these different FBI agents were like and things like that. So I enjoyed that very much. And whatever I found there, I was able to incorporate when I finally got a chance to direct myself. And then a few years later, I got to direct a thing called Oxford Blues that starred Rob Lowe. And we went to Oxford, and I wrote and directed that screenplay at Oxford. And then later on, I wrote a Western again. It's history, but I wrote a Western called Frank and Jesse. It starred Rob Lowe and Bill Paxton, and I directed that too. And I enjoyed that Western. I enjoyed doing that research a lot.
What made you want to take that leap from writing to directing?
Well, I think it felt like it was time, that I had seen so many of my movies get made. Some of them I was really happy with, some of them a little bit less than happy. But I wanted to be able to, I think what pushed me over the edge is at when I was working on other movies of mine that were being produced, and the actors wanted to ask questions. And then I started to, be free with my information and free what I had known, and wanted to be helpful to actors. I have a huge love for actors. So what happened was, directors and producers started to say, if you're going to talk to the actors, talk through us. Tell us what you want to, and we'll do it. And I went, hell, I don't need to talk through you, and you're not my interpreter. So I thought maybe it's time that I talk directly to the actors. So I have such a high regard for what the actor does and the work of an actor that I wanted a chance to talk with them and to create with them. So I kept doing that. I did a few movies. I directed a few, and I continued writing a lot. And then I had written the first draft of Air Force One with that Harrison Ford ultimately did. And then I've done a lot of action pictures. I wrote for Richard Pryor. I wrote a movie called Some Kind of Hero, and I loved working with Richard. I wrote a thing called Dr. Detroit for Dan Aykroyd, and it was a wacky comedy, and we had a great time, and I loved doing that. I wrote the last movie with Jackie Gleason and Art Carney, The Honeymooners, and I was a writer and producer of that TV movie that they did. So I got a chance to meet some incredibly wonderful people. And then, so I've been doing that for a long time. And then during the Writers Guild strike, I had this notion that I wanted to write another airplane hijacking a script. And I started to write the script, and I talked to a bunch of people that I had met in the Air Force when I did my research on Air Force One. I met a bunch of people who would talk to me about the newest generation of bombers and high-tech bombers, and they are amazing what they can do and what they're going to be able to do. So I thought, that's great. I can take a plane like that with all the magical elements that it has and let some bad guys try to take it and steal it and then have them defeated. So I started to write the script, and then the strike I knew was going to go on for quite some time, and I couldn't talk to anybody about it. But I realized I could talk to people about the novel. Mm-hmm. Because that was legal for a writer, and so I decided to approach it as a novel. And as I was working on it and writing it, I began to realize that the most advanced superplane the world has ever seen, it has 38,000 systems operating at the same time. No human being can handle that. So naturally, they would have to have the most advanced artificial intelligence ever seen by man. And so I started to write the story, and I realized that it would be dumb of me to let the plane be hijacked by bad guys and then see the good guy try to get it back, who was my hero, who was the in charge of security and is an ex-Navy SEAL. I thought, I can't believe that could happen. And then I started realizing that on the news every single day, there were only two things people were talking about. One was Donald Trump, and the other one was artificial intelligence. And I suddenly realized if this plane is going to be hijacked, the artificial intelligence is going to have to do something about it. And so I realized that my hero, the security guy, and artificial intelligence working together could both defeat the bad guys. So I did that in the book, and I suddenly realized on page 50, I went, oh my God, the story is over. The bad guys have been stopped. How do you do something about that? So I sat down and I started to think, what the hell am I going to do now? And I started to come up with a notion. I thought it came to me like really in a flash. Jay, it was amazing. I suddenly thought the most advanced AI unit ever created by science, it seizes the deadliest warplane ever built by man, and then threatens the entire world and the future of mankind. That's the story. So Black Sun could be a nonstop, relentless action thriller, a page turner that grips with icy fingers and doesn't let go. I wanted to make a white knuckle ride into a pure hell that reveals the most important question of our time and explores it as man finally created the Frankenstein monster of his own undoing. And that became the theme of my book, and that became the theme of this movie, of this book, which ultimately one day hopefully will be a movie. And that's the story I wanted to tell. I'm very good with action. I care about it a lot. And the kind of writing that I do, all novelists, the great ones, and I'm not saying that I'm great by any means, the great ones have an identity. Hemingway has a certain visceral quality and talks about the visceral, struggle of life and, what it takes to be a man, all of those things. He is the blood and sinew of writing. Patterson is a great storyteller and loves complications of spying and all of that. That's his thing. I was raised on, when I was a kid, I was in love with radio theater of the mind, what they called it. And believe me, there were nights when I got under the covers and my mother couldn't see me, and I had a radio with me, not a flashlight and a dirty book, but I had a radio with me, and I'm listening to some of these great radio broadcasts with great stories, and I loved the way it told it. And so as I began to write my novel, I realized that what I was doing with this action, with all the chases and intensity and gunfire and surprises and twists and turns, I suddenly realized that the kind of writer I am, since my training is as a screenwriter, I write novels that are really the IMAX movie for the brain. That the idea is that you could sit down and put your feet back and read my book, and it surrounds you with a vision of different countries, different places, different things you've never seen before. But also, I think it puts you right in the middle of the action. And it's epic action. So I think that's what I wanted to share with people, an epic event in terms of a novel that reads and takes you into a whole new world where you don't need to look at it on your mobile phone. You can look at it on the mobile screen inside your brain, and you can be part of it. And that's what I tried to do here, is put you in the middle of an event and 16 days of pure hell that this country goes through when Adam, who is my AI guy, threatens the entire world.
Nice. I cannot wait to read this.
I was very pleased and really excited when Kirkus Reviews looked at the book, and they understood. They said it's a nonstop thrill ride, that they think it's a terrific thriller, very well done. But they saw the more important issue, that it really deals with the more important issue of what role and what is the dangers of AI in the future. And it said I definitely handled that, which I was very proud of. And I'm very proud that they saw what my basic intent was, to explore it, to give some solutions, because there are scientists all over the world that are writing letters every day, forming committees, trying to convince different governments around the world that we need to put limitations on what AI can be. You've got Elon Musk right now, who's trying to basically corner the AI marketplace and make it without any limitations at all. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be. It'll make him a lot of money, but it may make the world a lot of pain. And so I think it's very dangerous. And I think there has to be I'm not the one to do the conversation, but there needs to be some kind of talk about what the limitations are, because AI can be magnificent. It will do incredible things. I know stories. I've talked to people in the AI world. I've talked to people who said they were doing things on breast cancer studies and looking for solutions to certain parts of it. And they had 80 doctors looking at, I think it was about 8,000 reports of a certain condition. And it took 80 doctors, it took them about 4 or 5 months to come to some conclusions. And they gave it to the same stuff to an AI system. And it had better solutions, quicker solutions. And it looked at everything and resolved everything way past what they had done in less than 2 days. So it was amazing what it could do. And so I know there are wonders in AI, but there are also dangers. There's a case now going in the courts that may be headed for the Supreme Court, but I think there's a guy who got a voice mailed from his daughter, and I think it may have been an image too. I'm not sure. I don't know the case that well, but basically it convinced him that she was being held as a captive, but it was all artificial intelligence. She was fine. She was somewhere else. And he ended up paying a lot of money. His wife had a heart attack. I mean, it went through a nightmare, and it's all the misuse of AI. So I wanted to do a book that's a thrill ride par excellence. I mean, that it takes us to a place we haven't been before. When Adam, my AI, seizes the plane, which is called Black Sun, that's the name of the book. When he seizes the plane, the Pentagon, of course, knows that their plane that they've spent billions of dollars to build and to test, they want to check out to make sure that it's still okay. And there are VIP guests aboard, and one of them happens to be the lady president of the United States. And so they go to check to make sure everything is still all right, and even if she's okay. But the Adam on board the Black Sun reads them as hostile, and our systems on that plane are so much more advanced than even our F-22 Raptors, which are the best fighters in the world. He blows them out of the sky, and suddenly he's at war with the entire world. And the only one who can stop him is my security guy named Jack Reese, who's on board the plane. And so it becomes a remarkable adventure into all corners of the world, and with it basically a system and an AI unit who looks upon himself as the sole repository of all the information on the planet Earth, that he can access any computer on the face of the Earth in nanoseconds, and put every bit of information that he needs at his fingertips instantly. And so he is the best friend you could ever have until he decides that he isn't. And that's the kind of story I wanted to tell. And I think I've told it in a way that will be very appealing to the reader.
Nice. I can't wait to check it out. Where can everybody grab the book now?
Well, I think that there are two things that you can do. One is you can go to Amazon and look for Black Sun, Day of the Humanoid, which is the subtitle of the book. But so you can look for Black Sun by Robert Boris, or you can come, if I can, all right with you to mention my website, you can come to my website, which is called Hollywood, not Hollywood, but HollywoodMedia.com or HollywoodlandMedia.com. And you can go there and check on the book. And even Outskirts, which is the publisher, they have a website also, and they have it too. And I think Barnes and Noble has it online and other places. So it's available in Kindle, it's available in a wonderful soft cover, and it's available in a hardcover. and I have very high hopes that one day it will be more than just that book. And I know what the sequel is to the book. If people respond to it the way I hope they will, I think people will find that there'll be a terrific thriller coming out, because the adventure goes on. And I think this story is going to be something that's very important for the future, because I think it's going to turn out to be one of the most important stories of our time.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Robert. I will put the links to Robert's book down below, everybody, so you guys can comment on it or click on it in the comment section. Robert, thank you so much for the time talking to me.
Well, it's a pleasure talking to you. I'm sorry I gobbled up so much of your time, but if there's any questions you ever have for me, I'd be glad to talk to you or glad to answer them at any time you want.
Thank you so much. I had a fun time. Everybody like, comment, subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jay. It was great.